the people who are unhappy, they always say, oh, I'm a victim of this and that, and the government should intervene. No, this is the problem. The voters voted for the most horrible leaders you can imagine. Most of them have no clue about the decisions they take, completely clueless. And the Fed officials, everything that has happened recently was discussed and written about extensively by Milton Friedman in the 60s. But these people in central banks, they don't know how to read. They only read what they want to read, economic models, and they want to go and give speeches so they get some money. They want to go advise people like Goldman Sachs so they get some more money, and so forth and so on. And the financial sector, that I have also to say, each time the Fed prints money, they applaud. Why? Because the asset values of their portfolios that they manage go up,
right,
and they get the performance fee and the management fee that's going up. And the people, the voters, if someone goes to the voters, look, and tells them the government debt is now $34 trillion in the US. This is the state, the federal state. And it's going up by $1 trillion every 100 days. The interest is now over $1 trillion a year. If interest rates stay here or go higher, no, they just need to stay here. By year end, the interest payments on the debt will be $1.6 trillion, okay? And that will become a problem over time. So there are three solutions to this problem. Either we stop the increase in government spending entirely. It will reduce the rate of inflation, but not by much. What we need to do is to reduce government spending. We have to fire 20% of all government employees. You have a revolution in America. Yeah. Then another solution is you go to the people and say, oh, we have to increase taxation by 20%. So the wealthy people will applaud that because the wealthy people have lawyers and accountants and all kinds of gimmicks and they can avoid paying taxes. But ordinary salary recipients, they pay the tax and they are the sufferers from these tax increases. So again, nobody will vote for someone who proposes that. The third solution, which the public accepts, you distribute money, you subsidize useless industries like EV car, EVs. Economically, it doesn't make any sense to subsidize this industry. You subsidize windmills. Windmills are very unreliable for energy production and they're unproductive. And you do all kinds of gimmicks that the public likes. And they vote for the wrong people. So we have to blame ourselves. I mean, I've been fighting against central bank policies for years, but each time I say something against central banks, my fund management friends, they come to me and say, oh, yeah, you're right in principle. But look, it's better that our portfolios go up in value than otherwise. In history, every country sooner or later resorted to money printing. And you then create an artificial boom. And the artificial boom depends on the continuation of fiscal deficits and money printing, and you get more and more inflation, and it can go for a long time, like we've seen in Turkey and in Argentina. But the problem is that the standards of living of poor people keeps on going down. You understand? It creates then in a society a lot of tensions, and eventually, and that's why historians like Will Durant, they pointed out that empires don't collapse from the outside, they collapse from the inside. You know, that there is tensions within the citizens. The poor people, they have to be kept subsidized. The Romans did it by giving out free wheat. and they gave them games, in the Colosseum, like all these combatants against animals and burning of people and so forth. There were not so many burnings as Hollywood produces, but there were maybe some. But there were spectacles. Nowadays, we have baseball, basketball, and football in America. And we have, thanks God, we have Taylor Swift. So we give the public the Taylor Swift. And they forget about the dismal economic conditions they live in. As you are aware, we are now in the world involved in two confrontations that are not easy to solve. One is a war in Ukraine, which in essence is a war of the US and its European allies, NATO, against Russia. The territory of the war theater is Ukraine, but it's a war, not just Ukraine, Russia, but a war of Europe, the US against Russia. I don't want to go into the details why it's occurring and why some people hate Putin. The only thing I want to say is he had zero intention to invade Europe. Zero. Number two, all he asked for was that NATO would not include Ukraine, because once Ukraine is included into NATO, the US and other countries could build all kinds of military bases in Ukraine right at the border of Russia. So that was his precondition. But the Americans, the State Department, they wanted to go to war with him, and they pushed the envelope. Now, some people will disagree with this assessment, but it's a fairly correct assessment from the view of international observers. The second war is now in the Middle East. It's a most unfortunate situation. It's very cruel, and I don't see their solution occurring anytime soon, and an escalation is quite probable. I have friends who believe we are entering World War III. Now, the third confrontation would be Taiwan, China, with the help, of course, of the US in the case of Taiwan. And that would be a very serious confrontation, because for the first time, missiles would land in America. The Chinese, they have the capacity and the capability to send a rainstorm of missiles onto the US. That I assure you. And so that would be a disaster for financial markets and for the global economy. I hope that it's not going to happen, that people will have the sense not to push the envelope too far. But I think they've pushed it already relatively far. But anyway, what people should do, we don't know the future. We don't even know much about the present time, because the media is so doesn't tell us the truth. But I would diversify. I would have some real estate, and I would have some stocks, and I would have some cash and bonds, and I would have some precious metals or other commodities, depending on your preferences. So with this, and keeping also in mind, in an inflationary period, you're better off in stocks that will go up, at least in nominal terms. They may not go up in real terms, but in nominal terms they could go up, or they may not go down a lot if you print money. But then the question arises, someone could ask me, Mark, the US stock market is now 50% of the world's stock market capitalization, and never before have emerging markets been so cheap, so inexpensive relative to the US. In other words, compared to the US over the last 10 years, the US has grossly outperformed most emerging markets. So if we talk about stocks, what should we buy? To this I answer, China is relatively low. And because China is relatively low, also the surrounding countries, Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, and so forth. These are all markets that are not extremely low, but relatively inexpensive. But what is extremely low are property stocks in Hong Kong, because the Western media, while 5 years ago they were all telling investors to buy China and to invest in China and so forth, now they're all there's not a single article that appears that is positive about China or Hong Kong. So my view as a contrarian, there is value there. Number two, I have to say, compared to, say, stocks, commodities are low. Agricultural commodities are very low. And I think there are some companies in the field of agriculture and also in the field, as I said, of real estate that are reasonably priced. And the real estate that you buy, you should live in a house, not in a financial center. You should live in a small village, but don't travel to the small village with a Rolls Royce and 7 employees and per helicopter and private plane and so forth. You have to integrate into a small village that is poor as being yourself a poor guy. Don't show off. Otherwise, they chop off your head in future.